In my previous videos, I discussed how we may develop hurtful inner elements, known as dysfunctional child and parent modes, as a result of experiencing abuse or rejection during our childhood or adolescence. Today we will look at how we deal with those sensitive spots. It's important to mention that everyone has some familiarity with these child and parent modes to some degree, even if only to a limited extent. While some people may manage to feel well despite these dysfunctional elements, others who are burdened with strong modes will frequently encounter emotional difficulties. We all differ in our capacity to manage difficult emotional experiences. This differs among individuals and is frequently influenced by early childhood experiences. Psychologists refer to the methods that people use to manage difficulties as coping styles. Coping styles can be viewed as psychological survival techniques that enable us to confront threatening emotions and situations. Coping modes are the strategies we used as a child to live as normally as possible with unmet emotional needs. They may also have been developed because of how our parents behaved and therefore served as a model for our behavior. So we developed these coping modes in response to our child and parent modes. These survival strategies were usually quite effective in our childhood. However, in our adult life, they can significantly hinder us. The intensity of coping modes often depends on the strength of the related dysfunctional child and parent modes, which I explained in another video. Therefore, if you are unfamiliar with these concepts, please watch the other videos first. In general, therapists differentiate between the three coping modes, although they often overlap. People may enter a surrender coping mode where they prioritize the needs of others over their own. They allow others to mistreat them and do things they don't really want to do because others want or demand it. Even though they don't have to, they may go along with what others want in relationships even though they have different desires. They often feel unhappy with their behavior. Sometimes they may actually use additional strategies associated with avoidant coping to keep the surrender mode going. For example, someone might drink alcohol before sex because it's easier than saying no. People may feel incapable of finding healthy ways to navigate challenging situations, which leads to negative emotions such as sadness, guilt, or anger. As a result, experiencing their own needs may feel daunting, causing them to feel helpless and avoid doing so. When they put their own needs on hold and obediently do what others want them to do, this often leads them to people who manipulate them. In these coping styles, people surrender to the punitive, critical, or guilt-inducing parent mode and start thinking negatively about themselves and feeling bad. An example: imagine a person who struggles with a surrendering coping mode in their work life. They may have a job that they dislike or find unfulfilling, but they feel trapped and powerless to change it. They may avoid seeking out new opportunities or taking risks because they believe they will inevitably fail. They may also struggle to advocate for themselves in the workplace, feeling like they cannot assert their needs or negotiate for better conditions. Or maybe you have a friend who struggles with the surrender coping mode. They may feel helpless, powerless, and overwhelmed by life's challenges. They may avoid taking responsibility for their life, feeling like they cannot control their circumstances. They might give up on their goals and dreams and settle for less than they truly deserve. They may also struggle to assert themselves in their relationships, feeling like they have to put others' needs before their own. Sometimes so-called dependent relationship patterns are linked to surrender coping mode. When someone in a close relationship always does what their partner wants, it's a sign that they have given up. It might make the other person happy for a while, but it can get annoying when they always say yes. Sometimes it's better to ask what your partner likes instead of always trying to please them. If you see someone being very submissive in a relationship, you might get upset and think they should stand up for themselves. But you might understand why they act that way if you learn more about their past. People rely on others to take care of them and make decisions for them because it makes them feel safe. However, they don't take responsibility for their own life. This pattern is linked to surrendering coping because dependent people are willing to sacrifice a lot to have someone take responsibility for them. The following statements will help you to estimate how strong your surrender patterns are. Think about times when you are given in to what others want, even if it doesn't match your own feelings and needs. What emotions drive you in these situations? What are you afraid of that makes it hard to set limits? Do you have an idea on why and where you developed this coping mode? The key feature of avoidant coping mode is that people avoid things that they find difficult. Difficult things might be performance requirements, dealing with disagreements, and even thinking about their own problems and feelings. There are many ways to avoid something. Sometimes it's just not doing certain things, like not going to certain events or avoiding difficult conversations. But other things can also be ways of avoiding, like distracting yourself excessively by watching TV, or spending too much time online instead of taking care of things you need to do. Some of these activities can be very stimulating, like watching porn or playing violent video games. And some people use drugs and alcohol to avoid things. People may avoid difficult situations and emotions, for example, by not forming attachments to others, not taking risks, making sure they don't need anyone, by working very hard, eating too much, or exercising excessively. Sometimes people may complain a lot about everything and seem to enjoy it, but if you try to offer a solution, they don't want to hear it. This could also be a way of avoiding things as well. This way of coping can actually cause more problems. In some people with serious mental health issues, avoiding emotions can lead to other symptoms, like not eating enough or hurting themselves. It can be hard to admit when you are avoiding things, and it takes some self-reflection to see it. The following statements will help you to estimate whether you tend to have behavior patterns that indicate avoidance coping mode, and how strong they are. Sometimes you might know that things like playing video games or eating too much aren't helpful, but it's not always easy to recognize when you're avoiding something. Avoidance can mean not doing things you need to do, but it can also mean distracting yourself instead of doing what you should be doing. For example, you might spend too much time on your phone instead of working on a project. If you have habits that you don't like drinking too much or eating too much candy, It's worth thinking about whether they are related to avoidance. Maybe you drink when you're feeling anxious or insecure, or maybe you eat candy when you're feeling unhappy or empty. Eating can make you feel better and take your mind off negative feelings, but it can also be a sign that you are avoiding something. It's easy to see when someone is avoiding things. They might skip events they agreed to attend, bring up old topics in meetings, or not sign up for important exams. If you get to know them better, you might understand how their avoidance works. Your friend might not come to parties because he always forgets about it while sitting in front of the computer, or you realize that your friend always starts drinking heavily as soon as she gets to a party due to feeling nervous. The primary emotions that underlie avoidance are typically rejection, threat, or a sense of detachment. Individuals may develop avoidant tendencies over time, resulting in social isolation and a lack of positive emotions in their relationships. Overcompensation refers to individuals who behave in a manner that is opposite to the messages of their parent modes and child's modes were true. They may display excessive self-confidence, even when feeling insecure, or they may show highly dominant, assertive, and sometimes aggressive or controlling behavior as a way to compensate for feeling inferior or helpless. However, not all overcompensation is rooted in feelings of insecurity or inferiority. Some people who display assertive, controlling, or dominant behaviors may actually feel strong, intelligent, and superior. In some cases, we refer to these behaviors as contraphobic. This term describes people who initiate situations or experiences that they find extremely distressing or challenging despite their discomfort or fear. So let's talk about different ways people may overcompensate for their insecurities. First is narcissistic behavior. Some people act like they are better than everyone else and show off their success. This can make others feel like they are being looked down upon. Second is a paranoid control. People with this behavior are suspicious of others and think they're being attacked or taken advantage of. They try to protect themselves by controlling and blaming others. Next is obsessive control. Sometimes people who feel insecure insist on controlling everything around them. They come across as inflexible and stubborn. People with attention-seeking behavior want to be in the center of attention all the time. They act dramatic and emotional and can't handle it when others get attention. People who have experienced violence in the past may become aggressive to try to control situation. They may use threats or violence to get revenge on others. And finally, cheating and cunning. Some people who grew up in an insecure environment learn to lie and manipulate others to get what they want. This can lead to cheating and other dishonest behaviors. Here are some statements that can help you identify if you exhibit signs of overcompensatory behavior. Sometimes it's hard to know if you're overcompensating, which means you're trying really hard to do something to cover up your insecurities. This can happen even when you feel good about yourself, and it may help you achieve your goals. However, deep down, you may not feel like yourself, and you may not know what you really want or need. You might also feel like you're showing off too much, but you don't know how to stop it. Overcompensation usually happens when you're upset or stressed out. If you're not sure if you're overcompensating, think about a time when you were upset and see if you acted that way. For example, if people have criticized you for showing off or being bossy, it's important to take their comments seriously. These behaviors might be a result of overcompensation, where you're really trying to cover up your insecurities. Think about the situation where you were criticized and try to imagine if you were feeling vulnerable at the time. If you can't remember, ask a trusted friend if they can recall a time when you displayed these behaviors. They may be able to provide an example that can help you understand your overcompensatory tendencies better. It is usually easier to recognize when others are overcompensating than to recognize it in oneself. When people are in an overcompensatory mode, they might appear agitated or fake, and they might try to take control over others or show off. The people around them might feel defensive, controlled, or threatened, and they might dislike the behavior, but they may not say anything for the fear of further overcompensation. This can create a cycle where the overcompensator feels even more lonely and unloved. People usually develop overcompensation as a way to cope with negative feelings like loneliness, helplessness, inferiority, or threat. They might try to control others to feel safer and more in control, but this behavior can push people away and make the overcompensator feel even more lonely and unloved. Different people use different coping styles in different situations. Sometimes people may rely on one coping mode more than others, depending on the situation. For example, someone with a strong guilt-inducing parent mode may often cope by surrendering, but may switch to an avoidant coping mode if the guilt becomes too overwhelming. On the other hand, people who use the overcompensating coping mode may be less aware of this style because they often feel good about themselves and in control of the situation. However, others may see them as egoistic and show off, dominant, or bossy. In the next video, you will learn about the healthy adult mode, which is a way of coping with difficult situations in a healthy way without being overwhelmed by strong emotions or negative inner voices. So stay tuned and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. See you soon.